So yes, I'm Kate McGuinn. This is Alison here. We're going to be doing a speeded up two-hander here. So we thought we had 20 minutes, now it turns out we've got 15, so we'll try and just talk fast. So yes, sorry, I'll just pause for a moment on our title slide because this is our Broaden My Bookshelf logo, which we're very proud of. We have a wonderful graphic designer, Mike Spikin, so I just want to give him credit for that. And this is also being turned into a sticker that we now have all over our Broaden My Bookshelf books to draw attention to them. I'm just going to talk for a few minutes about what Broaden My Bookshelf is, a bit about its history and the first 5 years, because we started in October 2018 with this, so we've just had our 5th anniversary of Broaden My Bookshelf, which we're very happy about. How we're still spreading the word about Broaden My Bookshelf and decolonising and diversity in the library today. And then Alison's going to talk about a couple of things that we've done as part of it, a reading list toolkit for lecturers that we put together, and also a human library event that we ran earlier this year. So what is it and how did it come about? I've already mentioned when we started. It was really inspired and motivated by the Why Is My Curriculum White movement, which has already been mentioned today, and also just growing awareness around the awarding gap in UK universities. It's a very basic initiative at its heart. It's really just has its aim to increase the range of books in the library, and also on reading lists written by authors from Black, Asian or minority ethnic background, so marginalised authors traditionally in academic libraries, and also those who identify as LGBTQ+. It's always been a joint project between the library and the Students' Union, so it wasn't just our idea. It came out of discussions with the SU, and they've always been really instrumental in driving it forward. So we always have support from the Equalities Officer and also the Education Officer, as well as sort of long-term members of staff in the SU. We also get a lot of help from the BAME ambassadors at the university, so that's a scheme that was launched just a year before Broaden My Bookshelf in 2017. And it's a group of students across the university who take on the role of advocacy for students from minoritised backgrounds. And traditionally they sat on quite a few university committees. Sadly, they didn't always get the support that they needed on those committees, and in 2020 they withdrew sadly from quite a few of those, which I think is a real shame, but it was because they weren't getting the support for their advocacy that they needed. So anyway, we'll move on from that. Just to talk about the first 5 years of Broaden My Bookshelf, what we've always tried to do, I mean, obviously it's a very simple project at its heart, to do with diversifying the collection. It's not nearly as wide-ranging in its scope at the moment as what Kay was talking about earlier at DMU, but we've always tried to also have quite a lot of events around Broaden My Bookshelf to have, just to start the conversation really about diversifying, moving towards decolonising as well. So these are some images from our launch events in 2018, but we've had quite a lot of other events since then. We just took loads of pictures at the launch events, basically. So this lady here is Dr. Shola Moss-Shogbamimu, who you might have heard of. She's an activist, a women's rights activist, and just an all-round amazing person. She's also a great singer. She sang for us while she was with us, and she also sat on a panel debate that we had at the same time, and she really inspired us to be activists in all that we do, and I think she was very inspiring for the students who were there as well as the staff. We also, as part of the launch, we had quite a lot of readings in the library, so you can see some images from those there. They were done by a combination of library staff and also BAME ambassadors. And I think that these events have always been great opportunities for students and staff to talk to each other about these issues. So, for example, at one of the panels, a black student said, none of my lecturers are black. I don't feel represented. What can I do about it, really? And one of the panellists said to her, well, you can take the initiative. You can find out who is out there. You can ask if there's a budget to invite in speakers, which was a good and supportive response. But, you know, sort of we feel it's a shame that black students have to do that, and students from Asian and other minority ethnic backgrounds. It shouldn't be that way, really, should it? So we'd like to work towards Huddersfield being a place where that isn't necessary. You know, they shouldn't have to be the people advocating for themselves all the time. Yes, so moving on. In 2019, we thought, well, we've bought quite a lot of books. We were actually given £20,000 by our head of computing and library services at the beginning of Broaden My Bookshelf to buy a load of books. And we really, you know, we went out and said, look, tell us what to buy to staff and students. We managed to get, you know, hundreds of books onto the shelves, because before that our collection was very, very white, very middle class, stale, pale and male in general. But yeah, so we had the books, but were they on reading lists? No. A piece of work was done and it was discovered, no, they were not making their way onto reading lists. So one of the things we did to try and engage lecturers and students with getting books onto reading lists was we had a little roadshow where we went out to the schools of the university, and the officers put together a load of questions around specific course diversity to start that conversation with students in particular. Just moving on a bit more in time, in 2021, when we were just emerging from the pandemic, we wanted to have an event to kind of relaunch Broaden My Bookshelf, to remind people, yeah, we're still doing this. So we organised an online author event with a writer called Johnny Pitts. You can see his very wonderful book, Afropean, there. On the slide, he won the Jelac Prize in 2020 for Afropean. It's a wonderful read and full of amazing photos. If you haven't read it yet, I'd really recommend it. 2022, we organised a panel debate, which I think was probably our hardest hitting one, to be honest. It was entitled "Diversify or Decolonise? What is the difference and why does it matter?" And it was quite a difficult conversation, actually. It was mostly members of staff and students at the university on the panel, and we did have a great representative from the NUS, Sarah Khan, who came along as well. But yeah, there were some difficult questions that we didn't have all the answers to. And just to bring that back to Broaden My Bookshelf as well, we feel as though up until now it's been regarded very much at the university as a diversity agenda. Okay. We're not yet really talking about the other D word, which is decolonising, and that is something we very much want to move into. So, you know, the next stage for us is going to be to look in, you know, critical detail at our collections and see where, you know, there are voices there that are the product of colonialism, and how they can be challenged, how they can be, you know, highlighted by people, by staff and students. And that's definitely the next stage for us. And, you know, that's partly why Alison and I are here today, because we want to hear what everyone else is doing about that. So, yeah, just to bring things right up to date, these are some things we've done this year. We've been really glad because we've had really renewed interest from our SU officers and also the BAME ambassadors, and they've been massively supportive in the last year. This slide you can see here, the image is of a display we just did during Black History Month that's just gone. And you can see one of the things we've done recently as well is we've put stickers on all our books that we've bought, which, you know, we should really have done ages ago, but, you know, time and resources were not available. So we've now managed to do that, and we're pleased with that, because it means whenever someone picks up a Broaden My Bookshelf book, they know what it is, and they've got a QR code that they can scan. It takes them to an online form that says, you know, do you want to suggest another book for the collection? So we hope that's going to be a very self-perpetuating thing. We also have some rather lovely postcards that we try and scatter far and wide around the university, and students can fill that in. And that says on it as well, do you think this book should go on a reading list? If so, please give us the module code. And we will then approach the lecturer who's in charge of that module and say, this book needs to go on your reading list, because we recognise that's not always an easy thing for students themselves to do. So, you know, we want to take that work on too. We've also, in the last month, had a couple of book group discussions in the library, which has been really nice to be able to do. You know, we've been talking today about how wonderful it is to be able to get together in person again. So, yeah, we did 2 of those. Alison did The Vanishing Half by Britt Bennett, chaired it, and I chaired Girl, Woman, Other by Bernadine Everest. So we only talked about one chapter of each of those because they're quite big books, quite a lot to talk about, but they were really enjoyable occasions. We hosted those as in-person and hybrid events, so we had like some people on the screen and some people there in the library. Yeah, also our SU officers have really helped us with publicising the campaign this year by producing some lovely and very cool short videos. You know, we're not very good at that kind of thing, but they're brilliant. So that's one thing they've really done to help this year. And also we hosted a human library event, which I'm not allowed to say anything about because that's what Alison's going to talk about, so I will hand over to her now.
Okay.
Just go like that.
Yeah, so as Kate mentioned, the SU and the BAME ambassadors undertook a reading list audit across all of our 7 schools and discovered that only 4.73% of the items were written by BAME authors, which was absolutely atrocious. So we felt that the next step was to do a reading list toolkit. And the importance of that, I think, is emphasised by a quote we've got from our SU education officer. And she said that a diverse reading list benefits all students, not just those who are BAME. It exposes them to different narratives from across the world and challenges the norm that a Eurocentric curriculum should be the default standard. And I think that's really important, and we've tried to capture that student voice on the reading list audit. We took much of our inspiration from, there's a decolonising reading lists developed by the University of the Arts London, and I'm sure loads of you are familiar with that. It's a fantastic resource, so we kind of incorporated lots of those elements into our reading list toolkit. We launched it at the end of July 2020, and to date we've had over 11,200 views, which is great, but only 11% of the items bought for Broaden My Bookshelf have actually made it to reading lists, which is absolutely atrocious, and it emphasises how much more work we have to do in publicising this and getting lecturers to take it seriously. Then in August 2022, we felt that the next stage in Broaden My Bookshelf was to run a human library, and we'd started discussions with the Students' Union to see how we could proceed with this. And then the Associate Director of Teaching and Learning got in touch with Kate and said, oh, have you thought about running a human library? It's something we'd like to do with 2 classes of our students. So we thought, oh, wow, this is brilliant, so let's do it. We wanted to do something that was slightly lower risk at first, so rather than running it with students, we decided to incorporate it into the Teaching and Learning Conference as a workshop. So try it out with staff first and get some volunteers to be booked from members of staff. If you're not familiar with a human library, it's a place where you borrow a person rather than a book for an in-depth conversation about some aspect of their life. And the person is usually from a marginalised community. The idea originated first off in Denmark in 2000, and it was run at a festival, and it's been held in over 80 countries since, and there's actually a human library organisation in Denmark who you can contact, and they will help you run a human library. So the benefits of the event is to enable conversations that can challenge stereotypes and prejudices. And really importantly, it's a safe space where difficult conversations are expected, appreciated and answered. So how did we start? Well, we did our homework. There's a fantastic webinar, if you've not come across it, that does exactly what it says on the tin. It tells you how to organise a successful human library. And then in lockdown, I attended an event run by Philippa Price at Swansea University, and it was a fantastic event talking about how they'd run a Living Books campaign, a human library that they called Living Books event in lockdown, and they did it over Zoom. And I contacted Philippa outside of that, and she sent me a toolkit that they developed, sort of reflecting on their experiences and saying what they'd found really useful. So we put together a small team of people, and it wasn't just librarians, it was people outside the library, so the SU, EDI representatives from HR, and then faculty members, school members as well. And we produced a planning document, so using a lot of the elements that we'd seen in the webinar. And really importantly, we secured some funding from Academic Libraries North, and they got an EDI Innovation Fund, and it was actually £500, but there was somebody else who was interested in doing a human library, which was Hull University. So they said, well, could you do something jointly, and we'll give you, we'll split the funding. So we got in touch with Hull, but they were wanting to run an event with students. We wanted to do it with staff. They got much more of a gung-ho approach. We were much more careful in our planning. So we decided, well, we'll split the money, but we'll run our own events. But what we're doing now is we're writing a human library toolkit to enable other libraries to run human libraries. And one of our staff development team kindly ran a training session. So we managed to recruit 7 books. So we wanted to train them so that they knew what to expect from a human library, because many of them hadn't taken part in a human library and they were rather nervous, as you could imagine. So this is some of what we covered during the event. So what to expect, setting ground rules, which was really important, managing the conversation, how to produce a book title as well, because we wanted it to be a very personal event for them. So we asked them to devise their own book titles, and also a chance to practice. And I have to say there was a real sense of community during that event. And I think it freed a lot of them up, actually. So, for example, there was an international student, and he revealed a lot of the mental health traumas he'd undergone since arriving in the UK. He was really, really honest about what he'd encountered. So these are our living book titles. So you can see they cover areas of neurodiversity, being gay, physical disabilities, mental health and race. The plan for the session, we had to condense it all into 1 hour for the conference, because normally it takes at least 2 hours. So we had an introduction and went through all the ground rules. We had 2 readings of 20 minutes with a short break in between. And then at the end, we did some feedback for our readers just to see how they'd found the event. So you can see some pictures here. We actually created T-shirts as well for our living books to wear. We did actually contact the Human Library, but their price was quite expensive actually. So we just went ahead and ran our own Human Library, but we couldn't use their logo because of that. So our lovely graphics designer, who Kate's mentioned, he devised a logo for us. And yeah, people were really proud to wear the T-shirt. This is one of the feedback from the readers, and she was absolutely blown away by the event. She just thought, it's a really fantastic opportunity to ask those questions that you've always wanted to ask, but not be worried about saying using the wrong language. It was a really powerful experience. And this was the feedback from the books. So we did like a focus group. We invited them for a lunch, which is how we spent some of the money, and just said, how did you find the experience? A lot of it was really positive. They felt that there was a good support network. They enjoyed wearing the T-shirt. In fact, that was that quote there that said, "I loved it. It felt powerful." And they enjoyed talking about their lived experiences. I think the downside was they felt they needed more time to tell their story. And that was the feedback we got from the readers as well. 20 minutes just wasn't enough because they were just getting into their story. And then the 20 minutes was coming up to an end. And, you could see the conversations taking place after we'd called time. So that's something we'll do next time, I think, just make it a little bit longer. And they wanted to digest, they wanted to reflect on the experience afterwards, because it was like the teaching and learning conference. We couldn't allow them to do that. We had to sort of pack up and go. But they wanted to, sort of think about how it was for them and talk about it with their fellow living books. So future plans for the Human Library. Well, we'd like to run another one at the university's Inclusion Week in March, but increase the time of the readings. And also we'd like to finish the Human Library Toolkit, and we're just about there. And then we'll be able to launch that and put it on the Academic Libraries North website and make it available for everybody. So that's it. Thank you for listening. If you're interested in what we've done, Kate has written 2 articles and we've put the links there, so have a look at those articles. But thank you.